Hello there, Master. I'm an assassin, Dorian Gray. I hope you don't expect much from me, but a painting should have popped up somewhere around here. Grab it and lock it up somewhere safe for me, okay? You'll know it when you see it.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Anime Void. I'm Brian, your host, and today I'm going to be talking about my assassin servant, Dorian Gray. But first, marketing! Do you enjoy this devilishly handsome man, the art of whom is provided once again by the amazing Kama? Perhaps you would like to own an art card of this servant along with all of the servants that me and Kama have produced together. Perhaps in an art card not dissimilar to this. Yes, I am producing special art cards of my fan servants in cards reminiscent to the ones that you find in Fate Grand Order. This is a prototype card, not the final product, but you can get the good idea of what I'm going for. So if you are interested in these servants I've been creating and the art that Kama has fantastically provided for them, I'm going to be selling these cards through an eBay store either towards the end of December or sometime in January, just depending on how production goes. And buying these cards will not only support myself and this channel, but will also support Kama. We are splitting the profits on these, so you get to support two creators at once while getting really, really nice art cards. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a win-win to me. But let's get on to this servant. So, Dorian Gray here is the titular character to the Oscar Wilde novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, which, if you haven't read, I definitely recommend it. I actually just finished reading this the day before recording. I've watched the movies and did a lot of research to make this character, but I never actually sat down and read the book, and the book is fantastic. But for a synopsis of the story, it is about the young man Dorian Gray, who is put face to face with the impermanence of youth when his good friend Basil creates a portrait of him, and in a mad wish, he wishes that the portrait would age and show the marks of a life lived rather than himself. He would stay forever young, and the portrait would become decrepit. Miraculously, his wish comes true, and it leads him down a spiraling path of hedonism and depravity. But he will never show a sign of it. Anything he does, all the years he lives, is reflected only within the portrait. He will forever look like a man in his very early 20s. Towards the very end of the novel, he of course starts fearing for his immortal soul, and that culminates in him attempting to destroy the portrait. But in destroying the portrait, he ends up killing himself because of how connected he was to this portrait. The portrait was his very soul. So he destroyed his soul, basically. Here as a servant, that ending does have great narrative importance, but I will get to that later. Right now, I just want to talk about the design, because you'll notice that he is in a very modern suit. It's not really 1800s. You would definitely see this guy on the cover of a modern GQ magazine. And that is done very purposefully, because he is a man who finds great value in beauty and presenting oneself in the highest art of beauty. So whenever he manifests, he would be dressed to the nines as far as modern sensibilities go to. He is at the peak of modern fashion. And I will point out that yes, I know he is supposed to be blonde, as described in the book, but I don't care. I like the black hair. But with synopsis and design philosophy out of the way, let's get into his abilities. His first ability is Cursed Painting. This will give him invulnerability, a debuff immunity, and will heal him. This, of course, is an obvious connection to the portrait. Nothing can really happen to Dorian Gray. He is effectively immortal, and that is shown more in subsequent materials rather than in the picture of Dorian Gray. Like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen do have a straight up immortal Dorian Gray, which is where I kind of get that immortality part from. But it does stand to reason that if everything he does and all the years he lives are reflected solely in the portrait, it makes sense that he wouldn't be able to die outside of destroying the portrait. His second skill is Charming Death, and what it does is that he charms all the enemies and decreases their instant death resistance. Throughout the entire story, Dorian Gray is an extremely charming person. He is able to woo almost everyone around him to a certain point. There are those who later on begin resisting his charms, but fundamentally he is a young and beautiful man. There are very few people that really can think ill of him unless they truly know what evils he hides within. His very influence is the cause of death to almost every single person that dies within the picture of Dorian Gray, though he did have a hand in directly murdering Basil, the person who painted the portrait in the first place. So while his hands were directly dirtied only once, he is very much surrounded by death. Every action he takes leads to death and destruction in some level. And for his final skill, it is Inconsequential Debauchery. With this skill, he increases his NP gauge, attack, star gather rate, and his max HP. And the reasoning for this skill really just goes back to the first skill. Again, Dorian Gray can do whatever the hell he wants. He can max himself out to insane degrees and not feel the repercussions of doing that. He gains all this power and evil within him that he just feels nothing. The only thing that changes is the portrait. The portrait is bearing the weight of the burden that would normally be on himself. So he can basically overcharge his spirit origin to insane levels by himself and be fully unaffected by what that would normally do to a servant. But everything comes to a head with his noble phantasm, worth 1,000 words. This is a quick noble phantasm that deals significant damage to a single target and removes the debuffs of all his allies and then replaces them with the corresponding buff. For an example, if an ally has attack down, it is removed and then replaced with an attack up, or if they have buff blocker, they are then replaced with debuff immunity, stuff like that. And the overcharge ability is increasing Dorian Gray's quick effectiveness. But upon using this noble phantasm, Dorian Gray dies. Like I said, at the end of the story of the picture of Dorian Gray, Dorian destroys the painting and so kills himself. But in the story, he did it for very vain reasons. He didn't really care about doing good for others so much as he wanted to do good so that it would save himself. He was doing it for entirely selfish reasons. So for a narrative of the character in Fate, he would of course be very reluctant to use his noble phantasm, because when he's attacking the single person, he is stabbing through his portrait. And that's why he dies. This is actually the most I thought about for a servant. All the other servants I haven't really thought of like a narrative arc for them, but Dorian Gray was just so ripe with it that it was just so easy to think about. Like, I can picture a Lost Belt or Event Singularity or anything like that, where Dorian Gray is just kind of this wild card in it, and ends up kind of working against Ritika Fujimaru. And at the end of it, he becomes quite enamored with them, and even though he knows that it would kill him, he turns against the person that has the portrait, the person that's controlling him, and destroys it. Of course, it sacrifices himself, but he does it because my idea for this noble phantasm fundamentally was a true redemption for Dorian Gray. because it is doing good for others with nothing good coming for him. And that was the thing that he needed to do at the end of the story. He needed to not think of himself and genuinely do good for other people. So I wanted this to be that. The narrative build-up and the just very core of this noble phantasm. But that is my assassin servant, Dorian Gray. What did you think about it? Leave a comment down below. I'm very interested to find out. I once again want to thank Kama for providing the art, and I also want to thank my dear friend Gerand for providing the voice. Did a fantastic job. They are great. Sadly, Gerand doesn't have any social media plugs that he wanted to put in, but you can always find Kama in the links below. And if you want to see me and more of my nonsense, you can like, comment, and subscribe, hit that bell icon so you don't miss an upload from me, and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. And if you want to support this channel even further, please consider supporting me on Patreon. All the links are in the description below as well. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to catch you next time in the void. Later.